What's up, YouTube? This is True Raw for TV. So, in this video, I'm going to talk about the marquee game from yesterday, that being the Clippers versus the Mavericks. It was the last remaining series from the first round, and I believe it was the only series from the first round to go 7 games, to go to full hilt. And to me, the only reason why this series went 7 games, I mean, a little bit of it you could blame on the mediocre Clippers coaching, some of it, the lack of role players showing up on the road, the lack of leadership shown by Kawhi, and the lack of aggressiveness shown by Kawhi and Paul George in certain stretches. But the real reason was Luka Doncic. Okay, for the most part, the Clippers had no answers for Luka Doncic. He had a historic uh, overall run these 7 games in the playoffs. I believe he joins Russell Westbrook as the only players in the history of the NBA to average at least 35 points and 10 assists in a series. Luka Doncic, I believe, once LeBron James begins to age even more and the league began to focus on other stars, I believe Luka Doncic will be that star that they're going to focus on. Yes, Kevin Durant might win championships, but he's not a media darling. I think Luka's going to be the media darling. Okay, um, you know, but for right now, because Luka, I believe, is the future. Right now, the Clippers are more relevant. The Clippers should have beaten this team in 5 games at least. Uh, but this has been a wacky series where, for the first time in NBA history, the first 6 games of a playoff series, the road team won every game. Now, the Clippers looked dead in the water after they started off 0-2, but miraculously, behind Kawhi Leonard's historic performances in Game 3 and Game 4, the Clippers tied the series. Uh, in Game 5, a lot of people thought the Clippers was going to seize control, but, Luka Doncic and Tim Hardaway Jr. had other plans. They win Game 6, take a 3-2 lead with their backs to the wall. Kawhi Leonard drops probably his best ever offensive performance. Ties his career high 45 points on 18 of 25 shooting. Just took it to Luka Doncic toward the end of that game. Ties the series at 3-3 apiece. Now, going into Game 7, there's two different uh, uh, theories about this game. One is, well, the road team has won every game, so Dallas should win. But there's another thought. Everyone probably will agree that the Clippers are overall the better team, at least on paper, right? And whenever the Clippers were motivated or had their backs to the wall, the Clippers won, especially behind the leadership of Kawhi Leonard. So you would think, with elimination at stake, with both teams playing up to their full potentials, the Clippers should win this game. But it started off like the Dallas Mavericks had other plans. It was the Luka Doncic show in the first half of this game. I believe he had 29 points. It was either 20, did he have 29 or was it 32? 32, I think. I think he had 32 in the first half. I can't remember. Either 29 or 32 points in the first half. I know he scored a lot of fucking points in the first half. And so much so that they were referencing huge first half performances of the past, like Jordan's 35 in the first half, Game 1, 92 Bulls versus Portland. They were referencing uh, Charles Barkley scoring 38 in the first half against the Golden State Warriors 1994. I think that was Game 3 of that series. And then the record What was it? Eric Sleepy Floyd, 39 points against the Los Angeles Lakers in the first half. 1987 NBA playoffs. Can't remember what round that was. I think it was the semis. He wound up with 51 points in that game. Um, the most points scored by a player in a Game 7 in NBA history in the playoffs, 47 by Dominique. The duel between him and Bird, 88 semifinals, Game 7. Um, Wilkins had 47 points. Bird had 14 points going into the fourth quarter, but Bird scored 20 of his 34 in the fourth quarter, and the Celtics wound up winning that series. Although I believe the next round in the Eastern Conference Finals in '88, the Celtics lost to the Pistons in six. Bird was held to only 10 points per game in that series. Very uncharacteristic performance by Larry Bird, who had averaged 30 points a game damn near during the regular season. But what people didn't know at that time was that Bird was suffering from bone spurs, and this would be the beginning of the end of the Larry Bird that we know of from highlights and from his peak performances. Although he would soldier on until the end of the 91-92 season. Um, this was a tale of two halves in a lot of ways, man. Um, in the second half, although Luka Doncic wound up with 46 points, which is the second most for a Game 7, and 14 assists, he started misfiring. He started misfiring. I think they did a much better job of at least making it difficult for Luka. But some of them were just shots he normally makes that he missed. I remember him shooting a air ball turnaround jumper. Uh, you know, that's a shot that he's more than capable of making. But when Luka began to misfire, other guys were misfiring as well. Tim Hardaway Jr. had a horrible game. Only what was it? What was it? 3 points or 7 points? Let me look it up. Tim Hardaway Jr., who was at one point averaging 20 some point, 11 points. He only had 11 points in 43 minutes of play. Contrast that to how he was playing the first half of this series when he was looking like an all-star. Now, the Clippers did have problems with Marjanovic at 14 points and 10 rebounds. Finney Smith had 18 points, 10 rebounds. Porzingis had 16 points and 11 rebounds. Now, Porzingis had one of his best games of this series. But the Clippers got all around help. Kawhi had 28 points, 10 rebounds, 9 assists. Morris was on fire in the second half of that game from beyond the arc. He finished with 23 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 assists. Nicholas Batum, who tried to baptize Marjanovic, 11 points, 7 rebounds. Paul George had 22 points, 6 rebounds, 10 assists. And Reggie Jackson had 15 points, and Man 13 points, and Kennard 11 points. They just started hitting their threes, man. They started just going on fire, man. And speaking of Batum trying to baptize Marjanovic, there was a moment, I think it was late in the third quarter, when Kawhi Leonard had a monstrous dunk, the type of dunk that I haven't seen him issue in some time. And I agree with Ticket TV, something he said in his live stream. Moments like that, when a guy, and we used to see this more often in the old NBA, which wasn't as predicated on guys who could shoot, but more predicated on guys who were athletic. I'm talking about the late 90s into the 2000s when you had guys like Carter, Grady, and Desmond Mason. Who else? You had the Stromile Swifts. You had Kobe. You had who else? Jermaine O'Neal. You know, you know, just just a lot of guys, a young Rashard Lewis, Ray Allen, who could do it. You know what I'm saying? Ask Tracy McGrady, uh, Jason Richardson, um, who else? Stephon Marbury, Garnett. Uh, I'm just trying to think of all these guys who could yam it on your ass uh, before injuries. Antonio McDyess, you know, late '90s. Jordan could even do it. Pippen was still capable of doing it. Grant Hill, and the list goes on and on. Basic Penny. Everybody I'm naming, they were capable of yamming on your ass. Back then when skill was a guy that could handle the ball, could score, could post you up, could play defense. But that guy in transition, if he could get a first step, if he could, get in between the gaps and rise up, he will yam it on your ass and demoralize you. And Marjanovic, who's 7'4", for a guy like Kawhi Leonard to go down there and challenge not only a guy like him, but that zone, I mean, that says a lot. And then you saw Nicholas Batum later on try to just fucking, you know, I mean, murder him. That shit has an effect on the team. It does. It there was, I believe, I agree with that was a turning point in that game. And then all of a sudden, you saw the Clippers just animated. And I think that did discombobulate the Mavericks because after that, what was a slight Maverick lead turned into a slight Clippers lead, and then ultimately a comfortable Clippers lead, and then ultimately a double-digit Clippers lead from which they never really seriously challenged. And then the final result was, what was it, 126, 111, I think the final score was. Yeah. And that's it. The Clippers move on to the second round. Dallas can be proud of themselves. But once again, they go home in the first round. Although they did play one more game this year than they did last year. Now, this is the question. Can the Clippers beat Utah? They have to. I'm telling you, look, for the future, for the sake of this franchise, they have to beat Utah. They gotta. They gotta beat them, man. Look, to get over this bullshit about a Clippers curse, they have to beat Utah. Not only that, if they lose to this team in the second round, these guys may not be here next year. Okay? Um, it doesn't make any sense considering what's left out there. All of these teams on the Western Conference, I'm not mistaken, none of them have ever won championships. The teams that are left out there. They have to beat, they got to get at least to the Western Conference Finals just to get over this curse shit. Or you're going to really start believing in this shit. Case in point, the Boston Red Sox. After they traded Babe Ruth in 1919, they supposedly, after the 1919 season, they supposedly were cursed. Before that, Boston was the preeminent team in Major League Baseball. Afterward, it became the Yankees. People say, well, it's because they traded Babe Ruth, which is stupid. I think it was just coincidental, but people start believing that shit. People start believing when you go the 1920s and the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, and you're not winning. You never seriously get to a World Series, and you start saying to yourself, "What the fuck is going on?" Well, in hindsight, I think what it is that the Red Sox, number one, were very late in drafting black players. You know what I'm saying? And everybody else has all these fast, athletic guys, and you still hanging on these, slightly pot-bellied, chain-smoking white guys, and then you make the mistake If you look at the Red Sox history, they keep, getting all these guys who could hit home runs, and that's all great. But these guys were slow. They couldn't run very well as far as bases, and they weren't great fielders, a la Jim Rice, Hall of Famer. Okay, fine. But there's a lot of people that aren't in the Hall of Fame. They're a lot better than Jim Rice. Dick Allen was one. That's just one. Barry Bonds, come on, man. Get out of here. All right? But you start believing that shit when Bucky Dent plays for you. He doesn't do shit. He goes to the Yankees. He hits a fucking home run. Guy wasn't known for being a home run hitter. Eliminates you from I think, what was it, postseason contention that year? I can't remember the circumstances. 1986 World Series. The Red Sox were one strike away from the World Series title. One strike away. They would have ended 68 years of futility. And then the Mets get a hit. Then another hit. And Keith Hernandez gets a hit. Then another hit. Then another hit. Then they score. And then they tie it with a wild pitch. Then Mookie Wilson. You know what I'm saying? Mookie Wilson tries to beat our little runner. A little dribbler, excuse me, to first base. If, Bucky Dent catches it, maybe they would have put out Mookie Wilson. I don't know. But the ball gets by Bill Buckner. They lose that game in horrific, demoralizing fashion, and Game 7 just seals the deal. And it was just demoralizing. But you know what? People got over that? Fans, the organization, when they finally won it all in 2004. When they made the Yankees turn into the Red Sox. And then afterward, the Red Sox just kept winning. They kept winning. You know what I'm saying? World Series after World Series after World Series. Because they mentally got over that bullshit. Even the Cubs, right? Even the Cubs in 2016. Bartman and cork bats and losing seasons and heartbreak and all of this shit. Hadn't been to a World Series since 1945. Hadn't won one since 1908. 1908. When motherfuckers were still getting along transportation wise with a horse and buggies and shit. 1908. But they won the World Series 2016, and you've gotten over that now. The Clippers got to get over this bullshit, okay? And the only way to do that is to get out of the second round. That's it. So tell me what you guys think.